Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you all so much for joining. I'm Michelle Johnson. I'm the event marketing specialist at ProcessMaker. During today's webinar, we will be discussing competing in the digital account opening arena and the new banking arena. Now, when I say new, I'm referring to digital. Make no mistake about it, the digital space is the field that we are playing on now. Excuse me. Are you keeping pace with how quickly technology is advancing? What is your financial institution doing to compete? What strategies are you putting in place? What tools are you deploying? We look forward to Chuck hitting on these points in today's webinar. So today's speaker is Chuck Wakocha. Chuck is our Director of Product Marketing and leads the product marketing efforts for banking at ProcessMaker. As part of a stellar team at ProcessMaker, Chuck's role is to help define and communicate our values and our propositions. Chuck's professional experience covers various disciplines and industries. These range from operations management, sales, human resources, to product development and management. Prior to joining ProcessMaker, Chuck was part of the rapid growth of SageWork and MST components of Abrigo, where he served in many roles, including ensuring successful management and the successful implementation of the allowance for loans and lease losses, stress testing, credit analysis, risk rating, and loan administration management tools to more than 300 financial institutions. At MST, he served as a senior advisor, helping institutions prepare for and implement the CECL guidance. As a thought leader, his analysis have been featured in Forbes.com, Inc.com, Huffington Post, and International Business Times. Chuck received a BA in psychology with a focus in organizations and economics from Harvard University and an MBA from the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina with a distinction in leadership. So if anybody will have any questions during the webinar, please go ahead and submit them in the Q&A section, and then we will answer all the questions following the event. Now I'd like to introduce Chuck. Take it away, Chuck.
I appreciate that, Michelle. Sometimes, listening to a bio, there's a point of it, you kind of, almost feel like, a little bit, get red in the cheeks, right? But, one of the things that, listening to those points, one of the things that really occurred to me is that, this is an area that I have been very steeped in, knowledgeable, and something that really gets me excited. A little bit of that is watching the growth, the development in digital, right?
Right.
Looking at the last 15 years and how quickly it's moved. If you take it back 20 years and looking at the changes, this continues to move at a breakneck speed.
Yeah,
So when
absolutely.
we're thinking about, like this topic today, right? Competing in a digital, arena, and then focusing on the digital account opening, this is still part of that, path, that part of that road that is moving very fast. So when you ask if institutions are keeping pace with how quickly technology is advancing, it's a challenge because, many institutions that I've spoken with will tell you that this answer is sort of a mixed bag, right? They'll give you kind of sort of answers. And when you dig into the reasons why, a common theme starts to emerge. And it's that most financial institutions that are having this mixed bag reaction have not taken a holistic or unified approach to addressing digital strategy. Typically, they will take it bits and pieces and try to adjust as they go. But what's really important is taking a holistic approach. So before we dive into that a little bit, just going over what we're going to cover today, again, looking at what this competing in the digital account opening arena means, right? And then looking at the key drivers that most institutions have given, to drive this. And that is, really driven by their growth strategy. I think we all continue to look at how do we grow, how do we improve, how do we increase, how do we increase profits, et cetera, right? And then the other two big areas have been interoperability. And for those who take that as a big mouthful, that's integration of the various tools. So over the years, institutions will acquire technology to do this, to do that, but often they're not integrated and they're not speaking with each other, right? So you still have very disjointed processes. And so that becomes a big challenge. And then considering what you already have, and then you're going to add new things or change things without looking at that. And then the user experience. And that user experience is twofold. On the internal side, the financial institutions will have a very frustrating experience, kind of harkening back to all those different tools and all these disjointed processes and things that are not synced, which translate into a bad user experience for the end users, the financial institutions' customers. If you don't have a good process internally, it's really hard to drive a good process externally. So being able to improve upon that user experience, which increases efficiency, which increases, the engagement with the end users at the other end. And then, of course, there's always contention with our regulatory bodies, right? The compliance end of things. And I call that the three-letter crew as it pertains to digital account opening. That's your KYC and KYB, know your customers and know your business. Your identity verification and identity authentication, two variants of the same thing. Your enhanced due diligence, right? So EDD as well. So there are those pieces that we have to manage and drive from this process. And then, of course, all those different things that are going between those in automating the manual processes that are involved. Again, we're going digital, we're moving into the digital world. How do we remove those inefficient processes? How do we remove friction through it all? So if we go back to that analogy of, or sorry, if you go back to that idea of not taking a holistic approach, I often think of a story that would help illustrate this.
Right.
Once upon a time, in bygone years, I was an athlete. I don't like to think I was an athlete, blessed with a little speed,
Mhm.
and I was plagued with hamstring injuries.
Mm.
And often I would strain my hamstring, rehab it, strengthen it, only to re-injure it again.
Right.
As I was going through this vicious cycle, a very perceptive physical trainer pointed out that the body works as a system, right? I was not treating the system. Instead, I was trying to treat a very pointed area. And in order to get my desired results, staying injury free and improving, I needed to transform the system. In order to remedy my hamstring issues, I needed to address my entire core set of muscle groups, my quads, my lower back, my abs, etc. So, in the same way, financial institutions need to look at this and take a unified approach to address the challenges of digital, right? And this digital transformation. I use this picture of the Vitruvian man as a way to look at, even back then, Da Vinci understood that this was an entire system. So when the institutions are looking at this, they need to look at their entire systems, the people, the processes, the technology. And in addressing that, ProcessMaker has developed a system that we call Intensify. And for us, this is an answer to that, a unified approach to digital account opening. So what is Intensify? Well, Intensify is a suite that provides an answer to that mixed bag that we talked about earlier. And the primary components of this suite, are used to address, that component, and that is account opening for both consumer and business, account maintenance. So once an account is open, those various things that go into maintaining an account, updating signers, adding new signers, changing addresses, updating different pieces of it, adding new products to the relationship. Then there are other elements into it. The CIF generator, excuse me, that is customer information, treasury services, origination and onboarding. Throughout the process of account opening, you can add those services initially, but these are great missed opportunities that deepen relationships from the institution. So making all these processes that we have, up until now really been, manual and very frustrating. How do we, continue to drive that in the digital process, digital world? And of course, additional process automation tools. There are little components in between that need to be automated. And that can go anything from a new employee at the institution, right? Onboarding them, going from everything from, signing the I-9 down to, your benefits. Again, there are a lot of these things that from a manual process can be improved. So when we talk about intensify, we're talking about a singular platform that allows institutions to drive this process. It enables financial institutions to achieve certain objectives. And those objectives are those same things that we see over and over. And I think as I mentioned, as you kind of mentioned, of the many institutions lose sight of that. I think long ago is way past 300, but it's those three big areas that continue to be the same for every institution: growth, user experience, efficiency, right? In growth, we're looking at how do we grow deposits? How do we grow revenue? How do we increase geographic footprint without adding brick and mortar, without adding FTEs, right? We continue to drive a improved user experience, right? Mentioned not only that user experience is both internal at the institution as well as external, for the end users. And of course, that efficiency, right? And that is in the streamlining, the integration of those various tools, the automation of those manual processes, removal of the frustrating ends of it from our experience. So with the intensify, it really involves a few things in there. And if you break it down, another way I think about this is if you go to a car dealership, and you guys will mind me, I tend to use a lot of analogies, and it's maybe it's a southern thing, it's a Texan thing where we throw in analogies to illustrate these things. If you go to a car dealership to go buy a new car, typically you'll see that sticker on the window that lists all the different things that the car involves, right? I mean, now you almost don't have to list power windows, but it lists all those various components. And when you think about that, that's actually what we're looking at here. Opening both consumer and business accounts, right? This is the simplified workflows for account opening. This includes the simple retails, the simple consumer, but down to the complex businesses with multi-layered entities, being able to drive the complexity and still drive it efficiently. A unified experience, both online and in branch. I can start a process online and finish in branch. I can start it in branch. I can initiate it, but having that same platform. So from the bank side of it, being able to have visibility on all the activities, all the accounts that are being opened, what stages they're in, etc. There's the KYC, those three-letter acronyms, KYC, KYB, identity verification, right? Being able to understand who is opening this. We've relied on the in-person experience where we see the person, but now in digital, they can be anywhere. They could be in different parts of the country. They can be, folks here being able to verify that the persons who are there are, who they say they are, right? The disclosures and signatures, the treasury services onboarding. And so, and this list goes on, and we can go through each of these, right? And these are things that are very key and important to that experience. Boarding to the core, right? This is the integration with the core, both on the front end. Let's say there's an existing relationship and we're starting that, or a new relationship that we're opening, being able to automatically board it to the core and have that integration set in. Often we look at that last mile of the account opening process, and we'll see that in the workflow, but that it also includes account funding. It's frustrating to go through an entirely digital process and then at the end be asked to go into a branch to, deposit the funds, to mail in the check. Right? We are in a digital world that should allow us to accomplish every part of the activity that we need in the account opening process. And then, of course, account and analytics. being able to understand all the activities that are performed, being able to understand who your customers are, what's happening, keeping a bird's eye view on all of these elements of it in the account opening process. So as we look at what this actually means for an institution, when we think about those big principles, growth strategy has often meant that we stick out a new branch, right? We build a new facility and we try to figure out where that goes. Well, the digital world is the new facility. Your website is the facility, right? It allows that reach across new markets, entry points into this, being able to adjust and you know refine all as you're going. And it's the digital environment that is the new branch, right? And these things don't need to, they don't need to be mutually exclusive. But when you're thinking about what that growth strategy is, it is so much easier to manage and drive your digital process than it is to build and maintain a new facility. And I use this picture because this is what you're starting to see a lot. The number of people who go into the branch continues to steeply decline. And institutions will have and list their facilities and have limited hours or limited availability in that by appointment only. And that's because of the behavior of the customer. They are no longer utilizing this. So if your institution is still looking at the physical branch strategy as a way to go, it's time to really move past that and think about what does this really mean for the future and for the experience of our institution, right? So if you take all the ideas that you had behind a physical infrastructure, how do you now drive it into the digital world? The other areas, what that means from an intensify standpoint is I need to be able to drive the exact same ways or the exact same endpoints that I was trying to drive in a physical presence, but drive it digitally. So when you're starting and opening an account, you need to be able to have that unified experience. That's whether it's online or in branch. So that means I can start an account opening by initiating this. If we're looking at a business account, I can initiate this as a banker and send this via a secure link to the customer. And that includes whether it's a simple initiation where I provide the basic information, name, email address, phone number, and they can authenticate and go in. Or even where I have the white glove experience where I can pre-fill and complete a lot of this application and send to those customers to be able to complete. And then of course, there's the in-branch experience. And then tied in between all that is I can start online and complete in person. I can start in person and complete online. And and mentioning the consumer side of it, typically that tends to almost always be done digitally. Most consumers will initiate the process online, but when you think about the business side of it, it requires truly having an omni-channel approach, so that customer can, we meet the customer where they're at. That journey can start in one lane and finish in the other, right? I can go down a full self-service driving it by myself. I can do it in branch, with someone at the institution, or I can have a hybrid of that. But that omni-channel experience is truly driving at that. Another element that is often missed by the digital element of it is those additional services like treasury, right? We often rely on someone reaching out to the customer and trying to get them in this. Quite often now, again, assuming our customers are fairly sophisticated, they know the kinds of things that they want. They have the opportunity to self-select and initiate their process. The onboarding for treasury services is so key for a business customer. So when you have their attention, giving them the opportunity to opt into those, to make those selections. Or again, from the banker side of it, I can initiate that process and drive it again digitally. I don't have to rely on trying to catch the customer at a specific time, from a phone call or trying to get them in branch, etc. I can drive that process very digitally. And what this looks like, again, in driving that experience is at the front end, the various ways we can start that process. But in that last mile, mentioning how do we get them across the finish line once they've gone through the application process, once they've completed it, and the account has been approved. Those last few points in that is, I mentioned earlier, boarding to the core, being able to automate that process instead of having to manually transcribe all the information we got, being able to send that directly into the core. But then funding, right? The account doesn't do me that good if I can't get moving on it. And funding is a key part of it. And there are lots of ways in which we should be able to do that. And that includes what we typically know with ACH. And for a lot of folks who recall the ACH validation processes where we used to send those micro deposits that'll take a couple of days. Have you seen that 7 cents or that 1 cent deposit into your account? That pinging back and forth. What that actually does is send information, to validate that this account exists and that it is actually in place. But that can be done instantaneously. So if I am a customer and I've indicated that I am going to fund in this mechanism, that information can be relayed immediately so we can validate that this account does exist, right? So then when the account is approved and is triggered for the funding, immediately we can have that source of funding available. So the other big area that tends to really, if you can look closely, I have a few gray hairs here. This is another area that really drives and accelerates that gray hair in this, and that's interoperability. Again, synonym for that is integration. Those who have spent any more than 5 minutes with me will probably have heard this analogy over and over. And I use Boeing, you can even use Airbus, but as an analogy in this is when Boeing delivers a plane to their end user, whether it's American Airlines or Delta, what they've actually done is synchronize a number of key features and parts to this. Boeing itself does not manufacture each and every component of it. What they've done is orchestrate all these various parts, whether it's the engine, that's made in Germany, the fuselage that's done in Japan, the structures done in France. All of these, they have created a unified process, synced it, made sure all these pieces are integrated. So when they deliver it to American Airlines, when they deliver it to Delta, it is a unified process where they'll stick their colors on it, and it's that end-to-end process. So as an end user, as a customer, as trying to get on the flight, all I want to do is get my ginger ale, my pretzels, and arrive at my destination on time. The rest of it has been tied up, right? So whether it's Delta, whether it's American Airlines, it is the unified process, that sync process that we're trying to deliver. And that is the same way when we're looking at the intensified component, platform. It is the unification of these various pieces, the integration and orchestration of these main components. Looking at the core, looking at your banking software, your online banking, what tools you're using for background checks, what tools we're using for our compliance documents, what tools we're using for our e-signatures. And of course, I kind of mentioned the funding, right? Being able to sync those various pieces. And it's that back-end integration that is so key to driving that process. And when you look at how it's actually driven, it's done, utilizing APIs. For those who want to really dig into this, we can talk more about the specificities of this, right? But understanding, the API structure, and as long as there's an open API, being able to sync that becomes key. Often I'll talk to institutions that say, yeah, folks have promised this integration, and unfortunately, this is what they deliver. It's a very haphazard, stitched together, composite of things. And as this picture kind of illustrates, that's what the experience feels like. It is very ad hoc done, and it's very frustrating, and it doesn't flow very well. What they were sold and what they expect is a unified process, a seamless flow of things. And that drives into that user experience that we kind of mentioned on the bank end and the customer's end of it. So it is important to make sure that integration is done well, which then leads us into a great user experience. So what we know about the user is that our users are sophisticated, right? It's not, it's almost passe to wonder what folks know. We utilize Amazon ad nauseum, right? I think if you if you have met someone who has not ordered from Amazon in the last 2 years, and in my case, maybe a little too much Amazon in the last 2 years, folks who use Cash App, going out with friends. There's a group of 8 of us across a table, and we're moving money between, splitting the check. It's not bring, your $2 out. It's not bring your $15 out. Who's picking up the tip on this? We're splitting across, and it's done in moments, utilizing those features. This is what the customer's experience is. And this is our sophistication. So when you look at this, that's what it tells us. Customers will move on if that experience is frustrating, right? If it takes too long to open an application, if it's disjointed, if I have to move from one point to the other, and this is what we're dealing with. And one of my favorite stats is that 34% of millennials would rather have their teeth cleaned than call into a support line. And if you dig into that, that's also means, do I have to go into a branch? My younger brother it's among those. And, a good example of that is I'll text him, he'll reply. I'll text him, he'll reply. Then I'll call him, he'll send me the voicemail and then reply the text. He's not trying to talk. He's not trying to engage, and there are those, that's an example of, the way folks are. I want immediate responsiveness. I need to be able to push a button and it performs what I expect it to. And that's really what the expectations are. And then again, thinking about what happened over the last few years, the expectation of working at home, right? That is the same experience that folks feel like, well, if I can work from home and I can do all these things, do I have to go into a branch to do a lot of things that I don't need, right? Unless I need to really speak with a lender and go into some of the intricacies about my financials. A lot of the things that I need to do should be accomplished from behind my desk, from behind my phone. And so what that means on the back end is all those previous processes that have been siloed, all those data points that reside in different things. If you think about this, and I think I may be preaching to the choir on a lot of these, that can be frustrating. And think about this just a little bit. Talked about working from home, right? Think about what happened when the branches were shuttered for a while and you had your folks working from home. Now that's a process too that was very frustrating. It was already frustrating when we were in person trying to do all this. I need to walk down the hall to print this. I need to walk down the hall to get so and so to approve the next step. I need to do this and do that. And I'm doing, almost like an anthill in the in our branch. But then now we are digitally, and different folks are there at home, and you're still trying to accomplish that. That's frustrating for us on the back end, which translates into frustration for our end users, for our customers. So it's taking all those processes and streamlining it into a flow, taking all those various tools and orchestrating it into that flow, right? If we look back at that analogy with Boeing, right? It's orchestrating all those various moving pieces, the core, our e-signature, our background check tools, right? Our compliance docs, our online banking. That needs to be streamlined. That needs to be integrated so it all flows. And when you're looking at this, that is the customer experience on the front end of it, right? What does that look like in account opening, gathering of information, presentation of our validation docs, authenticating who I am, reviewing my documents and compliance stuff, signing, so that e-sign, right? The funding that we mentioned, and of course, boarding to the core in that last mile. All of these moving pieces need to be synced, and that is among the elements that really drive that customer experience. If we drive a great customer experience, we're going to drive the other element of it, which is efficiency, right? That's what it is. So when we get all that together, there's a part of it that, kind of worries most of us, and that is where those three-letter acronyms come in, right? Again, we've taken for granted that we can see someone across the way, we can see the persons when they've come in, but compliance requires that we continue to know who they are, and this is an ongoing and ever-moving thing, right? The customers, knowing your businesses, verifying who that person is, right? They've supplied information, authenticating that person as well. And so these things, can, make us a little bit nervous in the risky elements of it. So what's happening on the back end in doing this is which tools we're using, right? Let's say we're using our driver's license. There are a lot of components in that need to be done to really validate this process. We're reading the driver's license. We're making sure that it's valid, right? That it has not expired. Making sure that it is an actual driver's license, making sure that the person on that driver's license is also the person that's doing this. So having the ability to biometrically authenticate that person. And what you're not hearing is the actual mechanisms in those, and they can be done in various ways utilizing different tools. And we'll save that for another session, or you'll see this at the end as well. We have done previous sessions where we dove into those mechanisms and how they actually work, or some of the tools and providers and what they're doing in that. And we'll also do a few more in the future when we look at those specific mechanisms and do a deep dive into those. But it's really taking that process that we, again, assumed because we were in person, we knew for sure, being able to drive it in person. Drive it in digitally. And I focus a lot on the initial process with our customers, right? Because that's important. Once we get our customers in, we've validated. But there's a huge piece that we also need to make sure that we drive in, and that's once our customers are in place. And you all will pardon me for this as well, as while we're still immersed in the community banks, I still have a legacy, and I use that generously. I still have a legacy account with a very big bank, and not to throw anyone on the bus, I'll just say it's one of the big four banks in there. But I had to update my information, and I actually had to speak to someone to do that. And so that meant I had to call and wait 45 minutes. And frustratingly, of course, they didn't have, here's my number, call you back when the next person is available. And I just needed to update my address, right? I should be able to do that. So thinking about that process and all the implications of it, as an existing customer, I should be able to update information about who I am. I should be able to update information for signers, for beneficiaries. As a nonprofit at a financial institution that changes, signers annually, this can be a very frustrating process. So we have authenticated people before, we know who they are, we have that relationship, but now we've added friction into the normal course of business. So that is among the things that we should be able to do. If I needed to add a new relationship, if I needed to add a new signer, being able to do that. And this is one of the great things about the Intensify suite. Now, the last component of the Intensify suite is all those pieces in between, right? So we've looked at and talked about the account opening process end to end. You've gotten snippets and bits of it as we've gone through it and got an idea of some of those components. But the platform itself allows an automation of various processes. There are a number of things that can be automated right now that are extremely frustrating. And the analogy that I like to use when thinking about this is looking at this, right? This as a platform. I told y'all about analogies. This is, this is one of the things you have to deal with me here. So the analogy here is, if I gave you these ingredients, what does it actually mean? If we look at it, flour, eggs, butter, right? Milk, right? And actually, let me go back to that again, actually, and really drive this point home. If we look at all of these, this is the ingredients to create cake, pancakes, bread, tortillas, right? And any of those. And then take it a little bit further, we can take that, add blueberry pancakes, right? And, by analogy, what this means is the foundational pieces are the same, but for each institution, there can be slight variance into the way you want this process to be driven, right? There's a difference between a $250 million dollar institution and a $2 billion institution, right? Those different asset sizes can have a big difference in how they operate, the resources available, and those things. So while I have the foundational tools, if we're going to make crepes or if we're going to make waffles, we start with the same ingredients and we put it together for what this looks like for the institution. So whatever the system, whatever the process is, we can design and develop those processes to automate this, right? And that is the flexibility and the great part of that tool and that automation. So when we sit down, we will talk with you as an institution and understand what those things are and figure out how to put it together. And so as we map that out, it is a very easy process. Well, say a very easy process to do it because we've done this so many times, right? The foundational pieces are there. And for those who have heard the low code environment, that is understanding what those underlying foundational components are and being able to drag and drop simply to put this process together. Or if need be, we can expand, tease it out, and drive some complexity behind it as well. So if you have those foundational pieces, you can make a slew of things behind that. So in thinking about this, there's an important part to really highlight this. The Intensify suite is that solution, right? That says I can do all of these things in component. If I need to do part of it, if I need to do some section of it, I can put those together. But you don't walk into a car and look for the missing pieces. You don't walk into a plane and look for a missing wing, right? Those things are put together. Now, how do we adjust and tie it or put it together for your particular institution? That's when we sit down and talk, right? That's where we'll really understand your situation. And why ProcessMaker? It's one thing for me to sit here and talk about how great we are, but it is also more valuable to let the market validate that. And that's where these awards really come from. That's what they're really about. When you decide to partner with the company like ProcessMaker, when you decide to put the Intensify platform into place, what you get is an award-winning company, right? We've been doing this for so long that we know this at a granular level. And as a partner, we can help you drive each of those processes, from end to end to deliver that. And this is an attestation to that, right? Best digital process automation solution, a leader, a market leader from the SM to the mid markets to the enterprise levels, being able to drive each of these relationships, understanding what it is for your particular institutions, but bringing to bear the knowledge and the best practices that we've learned across the 20 years that we've been doing this. There's the part of it that says 9 out of 10 doctors will recommend this or recommend that. And that's really what the market is saying to us. Here are folks that can validate and say, yes, we've made this decision. We've chosen to drive this relationship. And this is a great cross section of some of the institutions that we've worked with. So as we're going into this, as we're putting the Intensify into place at your institution, rest assured that this is something that we've done over and over and understand from the granularity elements of it down to the big picture, the transformational components of it from a digital transformation. And if you want to learn more, we'd love to hear from you. Visit us at ProcessMaker, and you'll find us under the banking section of it. and set up a time. Let's talk. Let's look at what your institutional needs are. Where are you in this digital transformation? Are you dipping your toes into this and starting to move forward? Are you part of the way through? Have you added a few pieces in that ecosystem and trying to figure out how to properly get them to talk to each other and integrate them so they can be better utilized and optimized in its use, in driving that efficiency, in driving your growth strategies? We'd love to spend some time with you to discuss what the best path moving forward and what the needs are for your financial institution. Thank you for carving out a little time out in your day. We look forward to, spending a little bit more time with you. For those who may be on a mobile device or moving around, again, we know that this optimized landscape means you could be anywhere. You could be utilizing any device. This QR code will take you to that. And for those who've attended this session, you will get a recording of this as well, and we will provide you with the necessary components of this. Now, Michelle, you did mention that we will take some questions. Let's see what questions we have in place.
Yeah, if anybody has some questions, please go ahead and submit them in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen.
One of the important things sometimes that we miss is, we look at this, is driving into, what does this actually mean for my institution? How do we implement this otherwise? And the first thing that I tend to, always want to make sure that we have and that we discuss is, we need to understand who you are. Analogy I often use and over is that prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. Now, the principles remain the same, the fundamentals remain the same. But what we need to do is look at your institution, that variance I mentioned, whether it's, a $250 million institution or a $10 billion institution, how we operate and how we put that into play, whether you're in California or in Florida, or whether you're in Iowa or in New York, there's a bit of understanding that's required, but it's, our ability to really drive that understanding and to put this into play. So as we look forward to the Intensify rollout here, that platform, from a bank standpoint, it's really, you have an end-to-end solution. And that analogy where you get into the car, right? You go into the lot, you are able to get into the car, stick your key in the ignition and drive off, because end to end, this is already integrated and set to go. However, should you want to make changes or configure things relative to what your particular institution needs, those pieces are there. And in that analogy, if you want to change your audio system from a Bose to a Harman Kardon, you can make that change as well. So we've come towards the end of our time here. And that was the primary question, is how do we get in contact? How do we talk to someone? For those who were registered here, we will reach out as well. And we look forward to hearing from y'all.
Yep. Thanks, Chuck. That was a very informative webinar today. We're all super excited to see how things go with the new Intensify product. Thank you all for connecting with us today. We hope you'll join us again next month for our next webinar. Thanks again and have a great day, everybody.
Have a great day, everyone.